Hey, Kina, it's been a while. What have you been up to?
Hey Sam, it's been way too long. A lot has changed. I started a new job and I have a big presentation over video conferencing.
That's awesome. Are you excited?
Well, I'm actually a little nervous. I've never presented anything over the computer.
You'll do great. It's not hard at all. I give presentations all the time. Let me share with you some tips that could help. What is video conferencing? Video conferencing is a live, video-based meeting between two or more people in different locations using computers, tablets, or phones that have cameras, microphones, and speakers. Video conferencing allows multiple people to meet and collaborate face-to-face long distance by transmitting audio, video, text, and presentations in real time through the internet. There are multiple applications and platforms that provide video conferencing services. Some that you might be familiar with are Zoom, GoToMeeting, WebEx, BlueJeans, Google Hangout, and FaceTime. Most video conferencing applications have similar features and ways of operating. Also, all of these platforms usually have a variety of meeting types. Let's look at the similarities and differences of some of them. Webinars are usually large meetings. One or more speakers give information and can be seen, heard, and share visual presentations. Attendees cannot be seen but can ask questions either in writing in the chat box, more on that later, or verbally. Webinars are great ways to get information to a lot of people, but they are not very interactive. Meetings are like webinars, but participants and speakers are all together. Everyone can be seen and heard. Because of this, meetings are much better for interaction, planning, discussion, and connecting with people. Meetings are typically smaller than webinars. Hangouts and FaceTime are similar to meetings, but are specific to Google and Apple. Live streaming is a service provided by some of the video conferencing applications. Meetings and webinars can be broadcast to web pages or social media outlets like YouTube or Facebook. This way, anyone can view the speakers. Only presenters will be visible. Live streaming is used for high-interest content or even performances. Let's walk through some of the questions and answers to help you plan. How many people are you expecting? The size of the meeting will dictate how interactive the presentation can be. How well do the participants know each other? If the group meets often and are familiar with working together, less formality and support is needed. If it's a conference or workshop type meeting, the format is necessarily more formal and controlled. Is it a lecture type of presentation, or are attendees actively participating? Again, a webinar is more of a stand and deliver format. Attendees can ask questions in a chat box, but not be seen or heard. Meetings are better for active participation. Is the meeting mostly informational, or are there action outcomes as a result of coming together? This will impact some of the technical tools used. Informational meetings are usually driven by PowerPoint slides, but planning meetings, for example, might use virtual tools like whiteboards, annotations, and polling. How many presenters? In a webinar, multiple presenters may be invited to be panelists, while participants are attendees. Will there be attendees who are observers only? Some public board meetings are conducted with board members being panelists and the general public being attendees, so that they can observe and participate in open comment periods, for example. In organizing your presentation, think through the roles of all people attending. Is this a closed group, or can anyone attend? Knowing your audience will make your presentation run more smoothly. Communicate with meeting organizers to get a clear understanding of the audience. Use strategies such as asking participants to introduce themselves in the chat box, or answer a poll question at the beginning to help know who you are talking with and to build rapport. Getting ready to present virtually. The setup. Setting up your own technology and practicing will build your confidence. Some tips include: when using a webcam, your appearance is still important, but dressing for online meetings is slightly different. You do not need to worry about comfortable shoes, but you should still dress professionally. Additionally, you may want to think about wearing clothes that stand out against your background. This may seem like a minor point, but if you wear black against a black background, participants will see what appears to be a floating, talking head, and that could be distracting. Also, take a look at your background. Try to find a neutral space that does not give away a lot of personal information. Pay attention to your camera angle and lighting. Adjust to your eye level. Look into the camera during the presentation and not at the screen. This is where practice can really help. Eliminate backlighting. Position the camera so the light source is in front. Close blinds and turn on the lights. Add lights in front of you. The camera magnifies what you do and is always looking at you, so watch your body language and gestures, etc. Check your sound. Eliminate any distracting background noise. Test microphone and speaker levels. Have a dedicated space where you won't be interrupted. Silence phones and put the dog out. Check your internet connection. Test your download speed and internet connection in the space you will actually be presenting from. Ask anyone else sharing the wireless space to refrain from using it while you're presenting. Also, have any props or other visuals readily available so you don't have to move off camera. Remember, have a plan B if technology doesn't work. While you are preparing for the presentation, use one of the video conferencing apps and join a meeting. Look at your camera and lighting setup, check your sound, run through your presentation, and practice. Getting ready to present virtually. The presentation. Depending on your style and the length of your presentation, you may or may not use something like PowerPoint slides as visual cues to reinforce what you are talking about. Because this is a fairly commonplace, a few tips will help you to avoid the death by PowerPoint syndrome that sometimes happens when this method is overused. Prepare slides and other visuals with best practices in mind. Most of the time, you can use the 1-7-7 rule. 1 idea per slide, 7 lines of text max, 7 words per line max. Especially when you are presenting virtually, you want the participants to focus on what you are saying and the general idea of the content. A strong visual will help them have a cue and remember the main ideas. Instead of putting paragraphs of text on a slide, supply the participants with documents that have key ideas outlined, definitions, parts of articles, or checklists prior to the meeting. It will help them follow along or dig deeper into the content. If they need to read something like a citation or summary, do not put it on the slide. Screens are hard to read as devices vary. Put it in a document, refer to it, have someone read it aloud while everyone follows along, and have a powerful visual to capture the thought. Use quotations for emphasis in your presentation. It is a good way to sum up an idea, challenge perception, start off a presentation, or wrap up with a conclusion. It is also a great reflection break, time for people to write some thoughts or the beginning or the ending of a section of the presentation. Another thing that can be used this way is a cartoon, memes, or even short videos. Whether using quotes or cartoons, be sure to attribute the source as applicable. Another good visual idea is to use faces to draw attention to your slide. There is something irresistible about looking at a face, whether it is a human or animal. Make sure it supports your point and doesn't distract from it. Also, consider diversity and the appropriateness of the visual to the audience. Your audience should always feel included in your thinking, so match your visuals to fit their needs also. Use a timer in your presentation for activities, breaks, group work, or breakout rooms. There are timers for PowerPoint, or set a timer on your cell phone and add a slide to remind everyone of the activity or break. Try to kindly enforce the time limits to honor everyone's time and keep the presentation rolling along. Use stories to illustrate a concept or make a point. Stories are how people make sense of information. For presentations, stories can begin a presentation or set a tone or conclude a part of the presentation to make a point. They can also be used to emphasize certain points and encourage participants to connect to the information you are trying to get across. Whatever the story, make sure it serves a purpose, even if that purpose is explaining your background in order to be more credible. When telling a story, think about the following. What is your hook? How are you going to get people listening and interested? What is an example? Show, don't tell the story. Use descriptive language that tugs at emotion. What is relatable? What will your audience have in common with the story? What will make the information you are sharing something they can connect to? Don't overshare personal information, and by all means, keep it short and to the point. This is a tool to get your point across, not a feature article about you. Wrap it up. At the end, deliberately plan in some reflection time and connect the information by reviewing and summarizing. Check back on any activities that need some additions or corrections and answer final questions. Here is a good time to use a quotation or tell a short story to put the overall idea into a conclusion. Some ideas to wrap up a virtual meeting might be to write a reflective sentence or summation in the chat box. Make sure you give participants your contact information and thank them at the end. If appropriate, they can also fill out a short evaluation either with a Google form or in an email. Getting ready to present. Other tools. Other tools that can be used to move the meeting along, build interactivity, and illustrate your point may be found within the video conferencing application. Some of these tools may include whiteboards, a shared visual space that can be annotated, annotation of shared screens. This is a way to show documents, websites, maps, graphs, photos, etc., and virtually mark them up. Polling. Establishing questions for response by the group. Breakout rooms. Virtually making smaller groups to discuss, problem solve, and work on tasks, and then report back to the group as a whole. Additionally, there is a myriad of other applications that can be used to quiz participants, share documents, and note-taking, or building collaborative projects. Practice with any extra applications or tools and build time into the presentation to explain the use of the applications to the participants. Remember, have a plan B if technology does not work. Getting ready to present virtually. Before the meeting. Communicate clearly and often with meeting organizers to make sure details of date, time, check the time zone, agenda, connection information, organizers' contact information, and intended outcome is clear. The organizers should also let you know what security protocols have been put in place for the meeting, whether it will be recorded, and what will be done with the recording, and if there are any attendees who need accommodations for special needs. If possible, ask the organizers for a practice run-through and technical check. If there is a moderator, meet with them to work out the meeting flow. Also, clarify how you would like to be introduced. Get the presentation room set up well in advance and plan on connecting to the meeting at least 20 minutes prior to the meeting start. Practice screen sharing. Have links, videos, external sources loaded and ready. Check your internet connection and speed. Check your camera angle and sound. Practice muting and unmuting microphones. And practice external app use. Again, have a plan B if technology does not work. Talk through those plans with organizers. Presenting at a virtual event. Beginning the meeting. If the presentation is with a new group of people who do not routinely meet, go through the technology expectations and give time for everyone to practice. If it is a routine, repeated meeting, quickly review what your expectations are to make sure everyone is on the same page. Practice muting and unmuting microphones and let them know what you expect. Do they mute their own microphone? Will you or a moderator control that, or are microphones left on for a free-flowing conversation? Tip: only allow unmuted microphones if there are less than 4 participants who have a quiet location. Otherwise, it is too distracting. Ask everyone to adjust their camera angle and be aware of objects or activities in the background that may be distracting. Many participants do not want their cameras on. However, encourage them to use their cameras as it really helps discussion and it helps the presenter get visual cues from the audience. Make sure everyone can hear you and each other. When presenting to a blended group, some in a room together and some attending remotely, ask those in the room not to have side conversations and to say their names when speaking so the remote participants can hear what is being said. If you are using additional devices or apps during the presentation or are referring to documents sent prior to the meeting, now is a good time to practice and get materials ready. Presenting at a virtual event. Setting expectations. Letting participants know what the agenda will be and what is expected of them at the outset creates a more productive event. Best practice in virtual presentations means building in many opportunities for interaction. Times and ways to interact need to be intentionally planned in, explained, and even practiced with participants for smooth meeting flow and high engagement. Think about: how would you like the participants to get your attention? Physically raising their hand? Using reaction emojis if the software has it? Putting something in the chat box for you or the moderator to see? Or some other manner should be explained so that participants feel they are valued members of the group. If there is a chat box function, explain the difference between group and private chats, and, of course, set the standards for appropriate language and content. What do you want your participants doing during the presentation? Is it okay if they take notes, answer phone calls, answer emails, shop online, let the dog out? Set your guidelines clearly and remember everyone's time is valuable, so a focused presentation without a lot of interruptions is the goal. Clearly explain how you would like participants to ask and answer questions, and if you use a moderator, which is recommended, include them in the explanation. Also, use the chat box or virtual board to collect ideas, questions, or wanderings in a virtual parking lot so that discussion doesn't get off track, but you can circle back to participants during another time. Finally, explain the presentation flow. Expectations for breaks adhering to the length of time established, allowing for movement and procedures for working off camera or with other groups, and expectations for written outcomes or products can be covered when it is appropriate. Presenting at a virtual event, facilitating discussion. Because virtual meetings should be as interactive as possible, the presentation should include some time for reflection and some time for discussion. Here are a few strategies to encourage participation. Probing, used to determine mood and general opinion, asking things like, "Have you had enough time?" or "Do you agree with this statement?" And then asking for a thumbs up or thumbs down on camera or with emojis if provided, helps presenters check in or get a quick consensus. Paraphrasing and summarizing. Restating what was said in your own words to clarify and check for understanding of all participants. This can be done after the presenter makes a point and then asks a participant to paraphrase or vice versa. Bridging. Connecting ideas by recalling earlier discussion or ideas. This helps participants follow along. Participants can also put bridging comments in the chat so the presenter can determine if everyone is following. Positive reinforcement. Reinforce participants when they share opinions. Virtual high fives, thumbs up, or cheers can be used to encourage attendees to respond. Include quieter members. Watch for quieter, introspective group members and encourage them to participate. This is where using breakout rooms may help people contribute who may be reluctant to speak in the larger group. These tips will be especially helpful for the meeting format where all participants can be seen and heard. Webinars or live streaming is not as conducive to interaction, but comments or Q&A can usually be used at least to get some audience reaction. Presenting at a virtual event. Concluding. One of the hardest things that presenters run up against is running out of time before concluding their presentation. When this happens, points get dropped, confusion happens, and important information may get lost. One way to combat this is to practice, practice, practice. Rehearse the presentation tools and materials with a timer running multiple times. This includes practicing setup, helping participants get settled, using extra applications, planning for Q&A time, and thinking through interruptions or extended discussion. If using slides, determine which slides may be skipped and which must be shown if the schedule changes. Have a plan B if the video or tool doesn't work, or if the meeting technology is interrupted. For example, if a video won't play, can you put a link to it in the chat box and ask participants to view it on their own computers and then come back to discuss it when they finish? Or is there some other way to illustrate the point? Be ready because something inevitably will go wrong. Plan on concluding 5 minutes before the actual end of the meeting and give some time and activity for reflection or final questions. For example, ask participants to sum up a key idea with one sentence in the chat box, or to write a reflection paragraph on paper. Give some quiet time and then come back with a final quote or statement. Always thank everyone appropriately and offer your contact information for questions after the meeting.
Wow, thank you, Sam. This was so helpful. I'm not nervous at all now.
No problem. You're going to do such a great job. Good luck.
Thank you. Talk to you soon. Bye.
Bye.